My name is Jeanette Lakomy. I am a nurse at a local community hospital, and I also am the host of Storytime with Miss Jeanette. Last March, I was working just one day a week doing story time at a local preschool. Once a week I'd go in and I'd read a story and sing a song with puppets, and after the pandemic hit, the school closed down. So a couple weeks into everybody staying home with quarantine, I got a call from the woman who runs the school, and she said, would you mind doing a story time and just record it, and so that we can share it on our Facebook with the kids, so that because they miss you so much during school and not being at school, would you mind recording it so that their parents could share it with them and have them watch it on Facebook? Well, going back to my own childhood, my mom and dad read to us all the time. So, you know, I think that there is something special about having a story read to you as a young child. Influences, I grew up with watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Romper Room, Magic Garden. Those were some of my absolute favorites, and they were always telling stories, and even if it was just telling a story out loud, not necessarily reading out of a storybook. And there was that whole imagination factor of having a conversation with a puppet that popped out of a tree, and it just seemed perfectly natural. And they would talk about something important, something not important, but there was something so magical about that interaction between the human being and whatever this thing was that popped out of the box or the castle or whatever it was. And I love that. I always loved that sense of imagination and wonder and creativity. And even when you got to see like behind the scenes stuff, it kind of like, you know, made you curious about how did they do that, and how do they turn this thing that is made out of material and buttons and whatever, and it comes alive on the top of somebody's hand with a voice attached, and the interaction was just magical to me. I know a lot of other kids too. So those were the kind of shows that I like to watch. I was mesmerized by them. And my husband, I know, had the same story. He helps out with the show as well. So he used to watch the same kind of shows, and he was watching New Zoo Review, and of course Sesame Street was his huge, he was a huge Sesame Street fan. So that is the way we both grew up, and it made a really big impact on our learning as young children, and just our love of reading and learning. And I think that's something that's really still very important and needed for kids, especially now. Who do I work with on the show? Well, I have to say it really is a family affair. I host the show. The puppets are operated by sometimes 2 of my children, sometimes 4 of my children, sometimes my husband. Everybody always has a little something to do with it. We always try to work on coming up with the storyline together. We kind of talk about it. Sometimes it starts with just a story, and that kind of snowballs into the whole show. Sometimes it's just an idea, like a lesson or a theme. Sometimes it's a song that starts the whole thing. So it kind of just depends, and everybody always has a little something to add. I kind of like it when we're all in creative mode and we're thinking of ideas on the fly, and sometimes some really magical ideas can happen where something we weren't really sure what we're going to do, and suddenly somebody has this idea and we talk about it, and it turns into something really amazing, and we weren't even thinking about doing something like that. So that's kind of the nice part about working in a group. So it's been fun, and even with our, you know, with everybody being quarantined, especially initially, it really gave us something to do while we were all kind of cooped up at home, not doing anything. So it was kind of a fun way to spend our quarantine. So yeah, it's been nice. Well, like I said before, we come up with our idea, and then we pick the day that we're going to work on it. You know, we always carve out a couple of hours, but usually ends up snowballing into a lot longer than we anticipate. But we read the story, we do the song, we also do some extra work with doing some interactions with me and the puppets, or just the puppets by themselves. I actually can show you one of our little friends that are here. This is Chaplin the chimp. So he's one of the characters that we spend some time with in our story time. He's usually around. He likes to sit at his little desk. He always likes to be coloring or drawing or crafting something. And he doesn't like to use his words very often. He's very shy and he doesn't speak very much. Actually, hardly at all. I think we've only ever heard him say one word through everything. But he likes to speak with these word blocks. So a lot of times if there's something he wants to say, he will line up his word blocks, and that's how he uses his words. So my experience as a mother, and you know, I don't call myself a teacher. I call myself a substitute teacher sometimes. But in terms of the show, I really feel like kids need to not only be read to, but be able to use their imagination through story reading, storytelling, use their imagination through either playing with puppets or seeing puppets in action, and just unlocking that whole piece of your brain that is your imagination, your creativity, your early language development. There's so many things that kids can learn out of hearing a story or looking at pictures in a book that I don't think they can get any other way. You know, I mean, there's wonderful things on YouTube and there's wonderful things on television, but I don't think there's any kind of replacement for a storybook. And I think it's something that's very important. So that's part of what I'm trying to bring to kids. You know, unfortunately, I'm sure there's a lot of kids that don't have the experience of being read to in their home. So maybe I could be a little bit of a replacement for that. And that's very nice for me. That makes me very happy, because I absolutely love reading to my own kids, or I loved to when they were very small. And it was a special time for me to share with them, and just seeing how they would start to recognize small words. When we're doing the show, sometimes when we're reading certain stories, we'll also, while you're hearing me read the stories, we'll show you a picture of the page. So they're seeing the picture that goes along with the text, and they also sometimes will see the text. And I think that's important too for letter recognition, sight word recognition, and just that early language development. Some of the kids watching the show, you know, aren't even really speaking in full sentences yet. And I think it definitely helps, even if you're reading a familiar story that they're repeating just to repeat, but eventually those words are going to make sense. And it's just all part of learning. So far, there hasn't been a ton of feedback, but the feedback we have received has been very positive. I know there's been a few kids that the parents have gotten back to us and like to watch certain episodes over and over again because of either the song or the story or whatever character they happen to see on the show that time. There was also one mother that had answered me on Facebook that had said that he loved watching the show, and she said it was the only time that he would sit still. So she was very grateful for that. And there's also been some of the kids who have sent in their videos when we would ask them, send us a video of something that you like to play with, or your favorite book, and then we would use those clips during the show and show them up on our magic wall. And they loved being part of that. And then when they see the episode and they see themselves as part of the show, it's very exciting for them to feel like they're being part of the show. So that part has been really special. They've really liked that. As for the future of our show, I think it's going to be the way it is for a little while. The school that I'm involved with still isn't allowing any specials into the building, so I can't do story time in person for the foreseeable future until, you know, those things get lifted. So, you know, we're going to continue doing what we're doing. I mean, our goal was 1 a month, but, you know, some months are difficult, more difficult than others to get it together and coordinate schedules. But I think we'll still continue to be posting these videos on Facebook and YouTube for a while, probably at least, you know, through the coming school year, and kids will just be able to have access to it that way. Well, I think essentially my message is a simple one, just to get back to the basics of, you know, enjoying reading, developing an early love of learning, an early love of reading, and just introducing them to new kinds of music, maybe some older artists that they haven't necessarily heard before, and just being something very simple and quiet and uncomplicated, even for the 12 to 15 minutes that our show is viewable for them. You know, things are very complicated and loud and flashy for these kids right now, and I feel like this is my way of kind of just having them kind of quiet down and slow down a little bit, and maybe just take a little time to pay attention to some simple things, you know, like the puppets that I have with me, or the colors that are behind me, or the words that are in front of them. I think that's something that's very important for kids now, and so I'm happy to be able to do that for them in my own simple way.